We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. As you can see, I'm back in Minnesota, and I'm going to tell you up front there's been no preparation for this show. It's going to be a shorter than normal show, and here's why. I got on a flight leaving Los Angeles at 6 o'clock. I got in about midnight. I'm sitting here at 1:48 in the morning. Not a lot of sleep. Haven't had time to look at anything because I've been on a plane. But I know you motherfuckers are expecting a podcast. So I decided to sit down and we're going to wing this bitch. That's what we're going to do. We're going to wing it. And I'll do the best I can to stay on top of things. So when this is shorter than normal, don't be surprised. Don't be angry. Tomorrow or today, actually, I'm back on schedule. Everything will be the same. So I appreciate you giving me some slack, if you will. Now, the big news story yesterday was, of course, this rally that Donald Trump had. It was at Madison Square Garden, which made no sense to me at all. I mean, here's a guy that has trouble pulling a crowd in a fucking cornfield, let alone Madison Square Garden. He has it in New York, which is an absolute blue state. And then he has it in a city, New York City, where most motherfuckers hate him. So why would he show up? Why would he do it there? Well, it was all about the performance. He wanted the show. He wanted to show that he could fill a place like Madison Square Gardens. And I've looked at different things. I don't know how many people he got there. Some people have said it's full. But what you have to understand is that Donald Trump pulls in people from all around the country, people that follow around his rallies. In fact, at the show last night at Madison Square Garden, he pointed out some ladies from North Carolina that are at their 249th show. I mean, this is like the fucking Grateful Dead. People going around the country with Donald Trump, like the Grateful Dead, selling Trump fucking merch and just living on the streets. This is the kind of crowd that he's going to pull in. But the fact of the matter is that, as I told folks, this is going to be a shit show. Let Donald Trump talk as much as he wants to talk, and he will burn himself down. And this whole event last night was an absolute shit show. It was nothing but anger and hate and threats of violence, and that's what it was. Donald Trump knows he's losing. This was a desperation attempt. He probably brought people in from all around the country. I'll guarantee you, just in New York alone, he couldn't fill out Madison Square Garden. Not with people that love him anyway, but he got a lot of people in. I don't know the exact tally, don't really care, because the only people that would have gone in there are the MAGA fucks. And you know what we think about the MAGA fucks. But the whole night just seemed to be angry and doing nothing but trying to discredit Kamala Harris and whoever else. And this is what I've said all the time. Um, Donald Trump has no substance. He has no points. He has no policies. He has no platform. He's not comparing anything that he has with what Kamala Harris has. All he can say is she's dumb. She's not black. She didn't work at McDonald's. All this stupid shit. But Donald Trump is absolutely desperate. And the one thing that bothers him the most is when people say he can't pull a crowd. And he can't pull a crowd under normal circumstances unless he's paying some people or pulling some people in for some reason. But he has this event, and there were a lot of people there. It was a star-studded show, if you call C and D actors and celebrities as star-studded. But the first one really kind of confused me. It's a guy by the name of Tony Hinchcliffe. He is kind of a B-level comedian. He's okay. He has a podcast called Kill Tony, which is not violent. Kill Tony is basically where he brings up and coming podcast or up and coming comedians to kill in terms of comedy, and he's fairly known for that. And he's done a lot of the roast and that sort of thing, but he's not an upper level comedian. And this guy somehow, who has a semi career going on, thought he'd hitch his wagon to Donald Trump, think that's going to help his career. Well, this fucker made a bad mistake. Not only did he hitch his wagon to the wrong horse in Donald Trump, But the shit he said was just absolutely fucking abhorrent. Now, he warmed up the crowd at Donald Trump's rally. He was the first guy. He described Puerto Rico as an island of garbage. And of course, he got some criticism about that. There's a lot of Puerto Rican people in New York, if you didn't know that. Um, he was one of the several speakers that were there, and most of the comments he made were sexist and racist. Talking about how many Mexicans were there, and people clapped. And he said, "See, they're letting them all in." He thinks he's funny. He has no idea what he did to himself here. He uh, he probably ruined his career because in just over a week, Donald Trump is going to lose. Things are going to start falling on Donald Trump's head, and this motherfucker is going to be attached to him. And if there's anybody that should be canceled, it should be him and anybody else that was speaking at this thing. There was Tulsi Gabbard, there was J.D. Vance, Hulk Hogan, for fuck's sake, a bunch of these people, and all of it was demeaning or violent rhetoric. And that's what the whole thing was. A lot of people compared it to a 1939 Nazi rally that was held at Madison Square Garden in 1939. And apparently it bared some resemblance to that situation. You see what Donald Trump is doing here. He knows he can't get the vast majority of people to side with him. This is why I continue to say that he's going to lose in a big way. So what he's got to do is try to whip up the people, the base that are prone to violence, or at least talking about violence. That's the funny thing is Donald Trump thinks he's whipping these people up, and then when he loses, they'll rise up and fight for him and put him back in office. That's not what's going to happen. These people are easy enough to go up to Donald Trump's campaign rallies, but when it comes to facing a National Guard troop or drones or whatever the fuck's going to come their way, should they try to pull that shit, they won't show up for that. They didn't show up for his indictments. They didn't show up for his convictions. They show up to this because it's a party to them. It's a fucking party. But when it comes down to something that might be dangerous, and let me tell you this, if they decide to get angry and get violent on January 6th or even after the election day, it's not going to go well for them. Joe Biden is the president. Kamala Harris is the vice president. They're going to be ready for it before it even starts. And if this group of gravy seals or meal team 6, as they call them, decides to fight, well, they're going to have to run away, and they can't run very far. So it's not going to go well for them. Oh boy, this is kind of a last ditch effort. Donald Trump knows he's in trouble, so he has to give the impression that he's very popular. That's really all that matters to him. He also said something else that was kind of interesting. He said that he would make RFK Jr. head of the FDA, the anti-vaxxer. Well, that's brilliant. That'll get him some fucking votes. Now, it's interesting. Donald Trump closed his Madison Square Garden rally on Sunday with an ominous 80-minute speech. He had all these people be with him, and he still had to fucking talk for an hour and 20 minutes. He was denouncing his political rivals, of course, assailing immigrants, and promising to invoke an 18th century law to pave the way for mass deportations. People keep calling him a fascist or an authoritarian or whatever you want to call him. He denies it, but he says this shit, which is the exact definition of a dictator or authoritarian or even a fascist. It was the opening acts of the New York City rally. It was a hodgepodge of donors, entertainers, and MAGA politicians who unleashed an 11th hour campaign furor that prompted angry rebukes from Democrats and some Republicans who worried the vengeful show would hurt their standing with moderate voters. Yeah, you think? You start talking about violence, your moderate voters aren't going to like that much. Even if they were thinking about going with you, maybe possibly, they aren't now because you're fucking maniacs. Anyway, local Trump loyalists who made up many of the speakers list ahead of the former president took the opportunity to spew familiar grievances at some of Trump's favorite targets. One failed Republican House candidate labeled Harris the Antichrist. Oh, well, good. Apparently, you haven't read the Bible because you don't know what the Antichrist is. First of all, the Antichrist is supposed to be a male. The rally began with Tony Hinchcliffe, as I mentioned, talking about Puerto Rico being an island of garbage in the sea. Uh, what you have to understand is he's in New York talking about how shitty um, Puerto Ricans are. But what he failed to understand is that there are about 500,000 Puerto Ricans that live in Pennsylvania. You know they're hearing about this. Pennsylvania is kind of an important state. They pissed off the Haitians down in Florida. They pissed off the Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania. That's the way to run a fucking campaign. And you ask me why I think Donald Trump will lose. Because he does everything he can to fucking lose. Um, Hinchcliffe went on to say there's a lot going on. Like, I don't know if you know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. He said, I think it's called Puerto Rico. That's not even fucking funny. I told you he's a half ass comedian. But apparently the line was well received by Trump supporters who filled the arena in Manhattan. Trump has recently taken to calling the U.S. a garbage can for the world when he rails against undocumented immigrants. Again, another way to win an election by calling the very country that you want to lead a garbage can for the world. Now, Hinchcliffe said this, and this is what I mean. I don't know where you get in your head where you think, oh, this is a good thing to say. He said, these Latinos, they love making babies. Just know that they do. After the rally, Trump's campaign sought to distance himself from Hinchcliffe. Oh, they didn't like what Hinchcliffe said, but everybody else was cool. Tulsi Gabbard, Hulk Hogan, all these other dumb fucks. But they said the joke does not reflect the views of President Trump or the campaign. Well, you hired the motherfucker and you put him on stage. Are you telling me you didn't ask him what he was going to say beforehand? Because if you didn't, that's pretty unprofessional, pretty stupid. I think you knew what he was going to say. And then when there was kickback, you said, oh, no, we don't want anything to do with that. You know how Donald Trump does that sort of thing. Project 2025, I don't know anything about that or the people involved, even though 75% of them worked for Donald Trump. Now, the Harris campaign seized on the comments about Puerto Rico, quickly clipping the video and posting it on social media channels. And that's what I told you. Just let Donald Trump talk. Let his buddies talk, because there'll be all kinds of clips that will be in commercials within minutes after they're said. Um, Now, the vice president visited a restaurant in North Philadelphia where she discussed her version of the island, along with plans to lower costs and create opportunity in Puerto Rico communities on the mainland. And I'm sure they had the clips, and all these Puerto Ricans in Philadelphia, certainly, but Pennsylvania generally, um, understand who they'd be voting for if they voted for Donald Trump. Now, Kamala got another supporter, a big supporter. Maybe not to me because I'm old and I don't know completely who this guy is, but apparently he's one of the most popular in the world. Puerto Rican superstar Bad Bunny, whose album Uno Verano Sin Ti was the most streamed album globally in 2023, posted a video of Harris spelling out her plan for Puerto Rico to his 45 million Instagram followers shortly after Hinchcliffe left the stage. Now, Republican Senator Rick Scott of Florida, whose reelection campaign kind of depends on the support from the state's Puerto Rican community, joined the backlash, writing of the joke on X. It's not funny and it's not true. Puerto Ricans are amazing people and amazing Americans. Yeah, Rick, just don't get an abortion, right? You stupid fuck. Another Florida Republican, Carlos Jimenez, a close ally of Trump, blasted the remarks. This is not a joke. It's completely classless and in poor taste. He was the opening act in Donald Trump's campaign rally. Again, you didn't talk to him about a script ahead of time? You didn't think of that? This is a presidential campaign. You would normally look at what people are going to say because you might be concerned about it. Apparently, you weren't concerned when he stepped on stage, but now afterwards, you got a problem. New York Republican Rep. Anthony D'Esposito, who's facing a competitive reelection, also responded on X by saying, I'm proud to be a Puerto Rican, adding, the only thing that's garbage was a bad comedy set. Stay on message. Now, Hinchcliffe also on social media addressed the furor, saying that his critics have no sense of humor. You demean an entire society of people, a race of people. And we're supposed to be or have humor about that. And he says, I love Puerto Rico and vacation there. I made fun of everyone. Watch the whole set. That's like saying, I'm not racist. I have black friends. Doesn't make a difference, Tony. Aside from the fact that you made these abhorrent comments, you've aligned yourself with Donald Trump. You're going to get canceled. And I know the Republicans always say, we got to stop cancel culture. Can't stop cancel culture because cancel culture is just public opinion. And there's only one way you can avoid getting canceled is by not doing stupid shit or saying stupid shit. You know, if I come out here and I said something against Kamala Harris, a lot of people out here would hate me and they'd be justified in doing it because I'm addressing lies or just ridiculous shit. You got to fucking use your head. And don't tell me, oh, it's just cancel culture. No, it's public opinion. Everything about politics is public opinion. It's like they're saying, well, this public opinion doesn't mean anything, or people shouldn't have their opinions. I should be able to say whatever I want to say. And unfortunately, that's not the case. You can't say whatever you want to say. You're a comedian, Tony Hinchcliffe. Well, I would debate that because most comedians know their limits, know the line, and know humor. And it seems like Tony Hinchcliffe missed on all aspects of this time around. Now, one of the other speakers was Melania Trump. And it's her really first speaking role this rally cycle, largely stuck to the script in his own remarks, including his own common assertion that his political rivals represent a traitorous enemy within. So Melania introduced Donald Trump. Isn't that romantic? But he was basically going against immigrants. And then he again starts talking about the enemy within. Now, remember, J.D. Vance was on with Jake Tapper, and he said, oh, he didn't say that. Show me the quote. And then Jake Tapper showed him the quote, and J.D. Vance didn't know what to fucking do. You would think for as much pushback as he's gotten for saying the enemy within, you might stop. But that's not how Donald Trump thinks. Donald Trump doesn't think that way. Donald Trump thinks, oh, you don't like that? Well, I'm going to keep doing it because I'm Donald motherfucking Trump. I'm going to keep doing it, whether you like it or not. And I'm going to prove to everybody else that I can make it work. Because Donald Trump thinks he's an oratory genius. And the fact is, he's not. Now, another warm-up act, former Fox News host Tucker Carlson, and he's going through the same old shit that he normally goes through. He said it's going to be pretty hard to look at the country after Harris wins and say, you know what, Kamala Harris got 85 million votes because she's so impressive. As the first Samoan, Malaysian, low IQ, former California prosecutor ever to be elected president, said Carlson, before exclaiming that anyone who is not impressed by Harris will be called a freak or a criminal. It's funny. A lot of these Republicans will say, well, if I stand with Donald Trump, I just get bullied by the Democrats. No, again, it's about public opinion. And guess what? It's not just Democrats, it's Republicans too. You always fail to understand or remember that. This is about good versus evil, bad versus good, truth versus lies. You either are with truth, justice, and facts, or lies and criminality. It's an easy choice. And if you're with the criminals, you're going to get bad publicity. That's not bullying. That's just pointing out a fucking fact. Now, there was one Republican politician, David Rem, I don't even know who the fuck he is, took the microphone to call Harris the devil while waving around a cross. Isn't that the way it goes? These religious or people who claim to be religious fucks are wrapping themselves in the cross and then calling somebody else the devil. There was a guy named Sid Rosenberg. He's a radio host. The fucking radio people, they are the worst humans on earth. And I can say that because I was once a radio guy. But everybody I work with, I don't really talk to anybody I ever worked with in radio because I'm not a fan. But this guy at one point worked next to Don Imus on WFAN. It was the largest sports station. He started off by attacking Clinton. Hillary Clinton. She was the candidate 8 years ago. And he went on to say, she is some sick bastard, that Hillary Clinton, huh? He said, channeling Trump's own past remarks. What a sick son of a bitch. He's talking about Hillary Clinton. Why? Hillary Clinton's nobody right now. She's a civilian at this point. She has nothing to do with what's going on. But this is what they do. They have to, they can't come up with any facts. They can't come up with any policy. So they've got to attack somebody. And once they get done attacking Kamala, then they go after Biden and or Hillary Clinton. Now, Rosenberg then turned his attention to migrants living in New York City and his fury over the local government attempts to feed and house them. God forbid we have any humanitarian mindset with people, whether they be illegal or not. He said, you got homeless and veteran Americans sleeping on their own feces on a bench in Central Park, Rosenberg said, but the fucking illegals, they get whatever they want, don't they? This is one of the things that upsets me the most, the flat out, the complete fucking lies. I was in Savannah Airport and I was sitting with my wife waiting for the plane to go back home, come back here. And I saw this dipshit with a Trump hat on, looking just like every other Trump-fuck, talking to a woman in a wheelchair. And as much as she was handicapped, I think she was a pretty hardcore Trump humper too. And he was explaining to this woman, I only caught part of the conversation, but what he said was, he said, and you know what? Those illegal immigrants, they come into town, and soon as they get here, they get a brand new Honda pickup truck or a Toyota pickup truck. And guess what? You're paying for it. And she nodded in agreement as if it were true. And it's not true. It never was true. But this is what they do. They pull shit out of their ass. They make things up. And when they make the things up, they share it with one another and they all agree that it's true. Whether they know it's true or not, I don't know. They aren't bright people. So I'm guessing, maybe they have no clue. And one of the things that troubles me about Trump-la-fucks, or people who aren't willing to stand up against Donald Trump, this country is so full of cowards. And probably the biggest coward on the planet, other than Donald Trump and some of his Trump-la-fucks, Jeff Bezos, the guy from Amazon. What you have to understand is he owns the Washington Post. And you no doubt heard about what happened with the Washington Post. The Washington Post announced it would not endorse a presidential candidate in this year's election or in the future. And Bezos remained silent as the newspaper staff's in turmoil. We got people quitting the Washington Post because they decided not to endorse anybody. So people are presuming if he's not going to endorse anybody and Bezos is the person behind it, it's because they want to endorse Donald Trump. They just don't want the blowback from it, but they don't want to help Kamala Harris at all. Now, I don't give a fuck whether the Washington Post endorses Trump or Kamala Harris. It isn't going to make a fucking bit of difference. But this shows that so-called one of the richest men in America has all the money in the world. He's not willing to step up and say, you know what? No, I don't like fascism. No, I don't like dictatorships. No, I don't like racism, misogyny, and anti Semitism. Either that or he's afraid of what the Trump-la-fucks might do to his money. Well, Jeff made a big mistake because there's a lot more people of decent minds that are now playing into this blowback. And I'm sure he's stirring about it. Now, so far, Bezos has declined to comment on the situation, even as his own paper's journalists reported that it was Bezos who ultimately spiked the planned endorsement. A source with knowledge told CNN on Friday that endorsement of Vice President Kamala Harris had been drafted before it was quashed by Bezos. So next time you order something from Amazon, you remember that the owner of that company supports insurrection, supports racism, supports misogyny. I've told you before, there will be people that say, oh, I'm not really as bad as Donald Trump. But if you support Donald Trump, you are just as bad, whether you like it or not. You can try to talk your way out of it, but it's just not going to happen. Now, in the last 24 hours, at least one editor has resigned. Actually, I heard two, and a high profile Post staffers have publicly expressed their dismay, as many in papers' opinion sections are furious over the situation, how the situation was handled. So there's quite a kickback over this. And this is what I've said all along. We go to the media, we go to the polls, everybody's terrified. Oh, it's so close, it's so close. These fuckers are trying to game the situation. They're trying to get you nervous, trying to get you upset so you keep consuming whatever the fuck they are selling. For many current and former staffers of this newspaper, the timing of the announcement was highly suspect and has led them to believe Bezos's business interest influenced the decision. But here's the problem. This kickback now is going to cost him more money than if he would have supported Kamala Harris. Former Post executive editor Marty Baron, who led the paper under Bezos during the first Trump administration, called the decision an act of cowardice. I'd have to agree. Absolute cowardice by one of the most wealthy men in the world. To declare a moment of high principle only 11 days before the election that is just highly suspect, that is just not to be believed, that this was a matter of principle at that point, Barron told CNN's Michael Smerconish. Trump has threatened Bezos continually, Barron noted. But when Barron was in charge of the newspaper, Bezos resisted that pressure, and he was proud and grateful for that leadership. Bezos has another commercial interest, a big stake, and Amazon. He had a space company called Blue Origin, Barron said. Trump has threatened to pursue his political enemies, and he rewards his friends, and he punishes his perceived political, and think there's no other explanation for what's happening. And that's absolutely it. There are people canceling subscriptions, and that's not a good thing for newspapers these days. I mean, who subscribes to a fucking newspaper when you got it online? Jeff Bezos made a calculated decision to not support Kamala Harris but in his mind, he did it so that he didn't piss off Donald Trump and Donald Trump's um, Trump will fuck followers. He thought he was hedging his bet, but apparently he wasn't smart enough to figure out um, that the other side, which is much bigger, might cause him a problem. Now, Barron said Post publisher Will Lewis's defense of the non endorsement was laughable, noting that the Post has endorsed in other races. If their philosophy is readers can't make up their own minds on the big issues that they face in this democracy, then don't run any editorials, Barron said. But the fact is, they only decided not to run an editorial in this one instance 11 days before the election. That's interesting, isn't it? They're saying, well, we just don't want to affect the election. They've endorsed other people in this very same election on the down ballot, but for some reason they don't want to do it with Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. That is absolute cowardice. And again, here's a guy that owns the Washington Post and also owns Amazon. Now, I've ordered things off Amazon. I'm sure you've ordered things off Amazon. I'm going to think twice about doing that next time. I don't like Donald Trump. I don't like the people around Donald Trump. I don't like the people that support Donald Trump, whether it be one of his political lackeys or Jeff Bezos or Tony Hinchcliffe or Tulsi Gabbard or Hulk Hogan. As far as I'm concerned, all those motherfuckers are canceled. We don't need these people in the cultural landscape anymore. And this is the interesting thing. What's going to happen when he loses? I mean, what's going to happen? What are all these people going to do? First of all, they're going to look silly. Secondly, they're going to wear the stink of Donald Trump for eternity. As far as I'm concerned, Hulk Hogan can fuck himself. Tulsi Gabbard, she's a joke. She's never been a factor in any political thing. So she's fucking gone. Tony Hinchcliffe, this second rate comedian, he might as well go to sell cars because he's going to have a tough time pulling a crowd after the November 5th election. But the question is, we go back to the Madison Square Garden event, which was vile, potentially violent. These were just sick fucking people. Has Donald Trump already realized that he's not going to win and he's just trying to whip people up in order to fight for him like they did on January 6, 2021 and try to gain power that way? Well, in Donald Trump's head, that wouldn't surprise me. But as I've said many times before, Donald Trump makes stupid decisions. He doesn't know what he's talking about because I'm absolutely guaranteeing you there might be some one or two people that do some crazy shit, but there's not going to be a crowd that goes up to the Capitol. I would be willing to bet that Joe Biden will think ahead on this situation and he will have the National Guard there while the event is going on and then let those fat doofy fucks come up and see what they can do. They won't show. As I've told you, with cowards, they only walk into something if they know they can win. This one, they know they can't win, so they're fucking cowards. They won't come. There won't be the violence that a lot of people are worried about. And lastly, as I told you, this show's going to be shorter because it's very fucking late and I'm very fucking tired. We'll get back on track with the normal schedule. I want to thank all the people that helped me with the shows the last 3 or 4 days, doing those in advance, and I appreciate them doing that. But people are still worried about the polls, whining about the polls. We know there are a lot of Republican polls that pop in here and they'll say that Donald Trump is leading. He's not leading. The polls mean nothing. They've continually been wrong. Just disregard them. All we can really do now is go forward and vote on November 5th or in advance. I voted already. Maybe many of you have too. But when this is all said and done, there's going to be a lot of people with egg on their face. Donald Trump, first and foremost. the Republican Party, secondly, and lastly, the fucking media for pushing this on us for the last 2 years. Oh, Donald Trump could win. Oh, Donald Trump could win. He can't win. He lost by 7 million votes and what, like 20 or 30 electoral votes in 2020? He has done nothing since that time to gain votes. If nothing else, he's lost votes. He's lost Republican votes. He's lost independent votes. So if you lost in 2020 by 7 million votes and you've since lost more votes, how in the world is it close? How in the world does he have a chance? And that's without even mentioning the fact that he overturned Roe v. Wade. That to me is the single most important issue in this election. With all the other shit going on, that's the most important issue. That affects the most people. Taking a constitutional right away from 50% of this country, the women, pissing off the 75% of the people in this country that support Roe v. Wade and the women. How is that a winner in an election? They thought they could win in 2022 after overturning Roe v. Wade, and they were wrong. The polls were wrong. The media was wrong. I kept having people run this down my throat. Oh, it's going to be a red wave. We're scared. We're scared. It's going to be a red wave. And it wasn't a red wave. There's no way it was going to be a red wave after just overturning Roe v. Wade. And if you think those 2 years caused women to forget about it, you're sadly fucking mistaken. They remember all too well, and they are angry. And when the election comes down on November 5th, you're going to see Donald Trump lose big. And the reason he's going to lose big is because of the women in this country. People are always worried about, well, what about the Gen Z? What about this? Women in this country are going to step up and push back. Do you remember when he was elected, how we had all these tens of thousands of women in the street protesting? You think they're any less scared or any less angry? I guarantee you they're fucking not. They are not any less angry. They're more so. They're terrified at the prospect of Donald Trump becoming president, and they aren't going to stand for this shit. They're going to come out en masse, and they're going to vote for Donald Trump. And then you have all the other people he's alienated, the racism, people of color. They always say, well, there's black people that will vote for Donald Trump. Yeah, there's a few, and I can't explain it. Neither can anybody I've talked to explain it, but not enough to make a difference. Donald Trump doesn't have enough support to come close in this election. And I can't wait till it's over so I can start rubbing people's noses in it. There's just no logical sense that Donald Trump can be close in this race. I think we're going to see states that we don't expect to turn blue. And when that happens, it's pretty much over. Say you get Florida, North Carolina. You get them to turn blue, or Texas. A lot of people are thinking Texas is going to turn blue. I'm not as sold on that, but I don't know enough about Texas to be sure. I hope it will, but we don't need Texas if Florida flips. Pennsylvania. Donald Trump just pissed off 500,000 Pennsylvania constituents by talking shit about Puerto Rican folks. How do you win that state when you step up and piss off 500,000 people that are in the minority that he's demeaning and his people are demeaning? How can anybody suggest that he's going to win after that? It's just not going to happen. We're about 8 days away from this election. I'm pretty excited about it. People say, are you still confident? Fuck yeah. I had somebody come to my DMs and this happened this weekend. You still feel the same way? Yes, motherfucker. I'm not changing my mind. The facts are the facts, and all this other bullshit doesn't change anything. I'm very confident. I'm absolutely confident. Sure, I could be wrong, but I just don't really think I'm going to be wrong. And when I'm not, don't think I won't crow about it, because I'm tired of people saying the opposite. I'm tired of people whining about being scared. It's time we stand up, we're tough, we fight, and we do what we're supposed to fucking do. This is a war. This is a battle. This is a fight. So if you're not going to fight, go sit in the corner and wait. We'll kick their ass, and then you come out when it's all safe. It's pretty fucking simple. I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up this Rational Boomer podcast only because I'm really fucking tired and it's 2:30 in the morning in Minnesota. Now, in LA that would be at 12:30, which is where I came from. So, I can probably get through the last few minutes of this, but um I didn't plan anything. I'm just kind of going off the top of my head and off news stories I've read about. Um, I just want to say I had a great time in Los Angeles, way more hectic than I'm used to. Go 12 miles, it takes an hour to get there. I don't know that I could live there. I love the city. We had a great time. We did a lot of things. We went to a rooftop bar, we went to a football game, we saw a bunch of stuff. My wife and my brother had to go through the murder tour, not an official tour. They took the tour, going to see where Michael Jackson died and where the Menendez brothers were, and the Chelsea Hotel and the Cecil Hotel and all this stuff. We saw all that stuff. Wasn't a big thing to me, but I know my wife liked it, and that's cool. That's cool. My brother was kind of into it too. If Old Soul had been with us, she'd be all over that shit. My wife and Old Soul love the true crime. And I got a chance to meet in person Abe Gurko. You know him as Won't Be Silent on TikTok. He's on the podcast a number of times, just recently, in fact. But I had a chance to meet him at a coffee shop, get talking to him a little bit. Great guy. Great guy. I don't know a lot of creators out there on TikTok, but I do know Abe, and I was not surprised that I liked him just as much in person as I do on the podcast. He is a great guy. He's a smart guy. Now, the thing about Abe, though, Abe is one of these worriers. I've talked to him about it. He goes, "Yeah, I don't know. There's this and this." I said, "Abe, shut up. She's gonna win. It's gonna be easy. Just fucking relax." And then he said the thing I hate more than anything. I hope you're right. Of course I'm fucking right. Don't say I hope you're right. No, I'm right. We need positive, confident attitudes going into this fight. All right. I'm going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. Like I said, a bit early, but we'll be back on track tomorrow. We've got some other guests coming up and shit. So we're in good shape. I'm back and we'll take care of things.